All right. Time has come once again to speak as witches and wizards do. I'm Daniel Dubois,
And I'm Michaela Stone.
and we're your hosts for the Think Like a Wizard podcast. Welcome to season 3, number to be determined and topic to be determined as well. Or, sorry, we do have a topic, but not a number. We'll see where this episode fits in. This is very impromptu.
This
So,
episode was decided a minute ago.
yeah, we were just discussing some business and blam. All of a sudden, hey, Mikhail goes, how about an episode?
Yeah, I think it's important because we've been discussing taking the blinders off and opening up to spirituality in a way that does not mimic a religion. It's not a religion. It's exactly not a religion. It's where you shed all the limits of religion and be open to what's there because you can access so much more. And one of the things we were just talking about was aliens. And what are aliens in your interpretation? Mine is that aliens are the spirit world that people are getting a little bit of awareness of, but maybe don't quite know where to put them. So by definition, the spirit world is alien to the person that doesn't have an awareness, right? It's unknown, it's foreign, it's othered, and it's a realm. It makes sense to me that you would have a spiritual realm that can be anywhere in any of the universes at any given time because it's not bound by a physical body. It's not bound by physical limitations. The spirit comes to this planet for that kind of experience that you can only get through the senses that we're given and through the life experiences that we line up and then go through. The point is not the experience. The point is, what do you do with that? And how are you going to take that information with you when you shed the body and you go back into the spiritual collective? Like, what are you going to do with it then? That's my version. And Danielle?
Before I say my version, I'm going to offer something up. I want the listeners to pay attention to what it sounds like when Michaela talks. I don't mean like the quality of what she's saying. I mean the tone, because this is an issue we ran into when we were recording another podcast episode. Michaela and I were speaking, and there was no issues audibly, but now suddenly, when Michaela's passions kicked in, there's a tinniness, there's a reverb, but it's from the power of her voice. I've been paying attention right now, and yet actually when we were recording the other episode and we were talking about it, there's a certain power in your voice, and it's starting now. It's becoming tinny through the. It's weird because it was not like this before we recorded,
That is so
and it
interesting.
didn't start on the podcast either when we were recording yesterday, our episode. It
And
only
am I still
came.
sounding tinny?
Say something again.
I said, am I still sounding tinny?
No,
Ha!
every time you
Okay.
get passionate, it gets tinny.
All right. Well, I'll try and stay zen. Let's see how that works.
Well, it's just interesting because I'm wondering because this has never happened on the podcast before. So yes, you could argue maybe there's a technical issue, and once Michaela hits a certain pitch, it causes a reaction. But
Hmm.
I don't know. Let's see. Or even more interesting, given the topics we're talking about, can you hear it?
Actually, that's a really good question. Like who's picking up on a change and who isn't? I was just in a 2-hour meeting with someone on Zoom, just like I am with you, and it was recorded, and at no point did I sound tinny. And the setup is exactly the same now as it was then. And we were just talking and there wasn't an issue. So I
Very
am curious about what that's coming from because there's nothing my end to indicate an issue. So that's
Right.
kind of interesting.
Yeah. So
Hmm.
to get off my thing of aliens, so I'll put it like when me and Michaela were talking earlier, I said, I have no doubt that there aren't physical beings on other planets, but I agree with the assessment. Whatever we're getting here is a spiritual phenomena. Unless someone can show some kind of physical manifestation, everything describing alien experiences are essentially more of a spiritual phenomena than it seems to be a physical phenomena. And like we were discussing, like there are spiritual beings who are very, very large and really aren't, I'll use this for humor, they aren't planet safe given their size. So either they have to show up as an avatar of some kind, or a direct projection in your mind, and then you kind of just get a distance conversation. But interestingly, so that, for example, the mama dragon that you guys are familiar with now, if you've been listening, she even looks different to me when she's working with Michaela when I try to look at her because she's not directly connected to me anymore. She seems darker colors, more cosmic in appearance, like she's blending into space,
Mm,
as opposed to the vibrant colors she was when she was communicating with me directly.
that's interesting. And it actually makes sense. Like it might not to the listener, but it does to me. Um, and what I was saying before about aliens being basically the spirit world and how we can connect. Well, the spirit world doesn't have those parameters, those
Right.
physical parameters. So if they want to sort of appear as insight or appear as a bright idea or a direction that you need to take, an intuition and knowing, like any of those things that you can't point to and say, that's where that came from. Well, there's no reason they can't appear to you that way. In fact, there's every reason to appear that way. It's a way of communication that doesn't involve barriers.
Yeah.
So it makes sense to me. And the blending from here into sort of universe into cosmic kind of state of being kind of makes sense. Yeah, I see that.
Well, that's a big one, right? Because like even for myself, like one of the ways I learn now or get my downloads is I'll write a story and then I'll explore topics through writing stories. And one of the big things I had worked on for a few years was I kind of had a fantasy setting, but I made it science fiction. So the gods were aliens who were trying to just basically fix their mistake. They had dropped they had crashed into the planet, and there's a lot of mutating substances that basically made the monsters and stuff. But the most powerful beings on the planet at the time were just basically like psychics, for lack of a better way of putting it, right? Just spiritually gifted people. And they used to explore the galaxy by astral projection and using psychic means. So they knew to prepare for the crash coming, and they knew that kind of thing. But the idea was been sitting in my head and I've heard people talk about. I think if you, I'm doing that thing again where I just kind of rush through seven different things at once. But so
It's
think
okay.
about, I guess he would be called a renowned psychic, the Ingo Swan. Ingo Swan. So he used to talk about going to other planets when he would astral project. But I've actually heard stories from other people. Even my mom relayed to me a story one time. She was out at a casino, and the guy sitting next to her at the blackjack table, they were talking about this kind of stuff, and he was sharing stories about his own traveling to like Jupiter astrally.
How
So me,
interesting.
yeah,
And not a conversation you would expect at a
no,
casino.
no, not at all. But that's what I mean. Like, so the idea that even if aliens could show up, but it's just aliens who are very spiritually advanced, and so they're just exploring the rest of the universe, not by so much by physically coming here, but by projecting here their consciousness. Also, it's one of my pet theories for a while because I follow a lot of UFO stuff to try to figure out what's going on with that kind of thing, that phenomena. And one of the ideas I started coming across was you'd send probes out, like unmanned probes with no living beings on it, because for like, I mean, the nearest star for us is like 3 light years away. and that's travel. So that's traveling at the speed of light, right? So my idea was more like maybe there is a civilization advanced enough where they send probes out. When the probe gets here, takes pictures, that allows their more refined souls to then have a target to reach.
Maybe. I would wonder why they wanted to reach it, to be honest,
Yeah.
because there's a path here that you just take on
Hmm.
a human form for a while and go and experience the thing. So there's a perfectly well-worn path. I
Yeah.
don't think it's difficult to do. I think you have to really want to do it. Like there needs to be a purpose,
Yeah.
probably, because there's only so much space, right? And we're already overcrowded. So
Hmm.
I'm thinking that would play into it, but the path is there, and
Well,
there's no need for somebody to see. Here's the thing that's been coming up lately that I want to share,
okay.
and hopefully I won't go tinny as I share it.
All
Um,
right. Because you're not tinny right now.
Yay. Okay, let's see how we go. So, oh my God, that just went. Okay, it'll come back.
Okay.
It was huge too. It'll come back. It'll come back. Keep going.
Yeah. My normal response when that happens to people around me, I just say, "So it was a lie then?" And you couldn't remember your lie. You had to think about it, so you couldn't remember. But
No, it's that
no, because
thread.
that's happened enough times on this podcast. It even happens to me all the time, even when I deal with people. It's just it's not time to say that thing. There's another
Hmm.
time when it'll show up, and it'll be the right time to place that in there. But yeah, like I still have the idea that there's probably physical worlds out there with different makeups, so you can explore different things, different
Hmm.
worlds, different properties. But the in between, like going from world to world, that's physically a big ask. But go ahead.
Got it.
Michaela went, was
Okay.
all excited and gestured with a finger pointing, and
I just clicked my fingers actually because I was like, got it. So here's a thought, and that
yeah,
is human beings have a slave mentality.
mm,
And what I mean by that is we always need to have someone in charge, someone who is the boss of us, or something who is the boss of us.
yeah,
So, in absence of that, we will create something. That's
yeah,
where religions come in, and this, the whatever is at the head of the religion is then the unquestioned authority, and of course, the authority comes through people who interpret this authority, but you cannot question it. It rules you. And then we have, in the popular coaching space, what do we talk about but leaders?
hmm,
Who's doing the following if everybody's leaders? But we're all looking for, who do we look up to? Who is the boss of us? So we
hmm,
have this sort of slave mentality where we have to do what we're told. And that, I think, is a very interesting paradigm for being on this planet. It's like, okay, so you're limited by that view. If somebody has to be in charge, if somebody else gets to tell you what you can and can't do, then, well, that's limiting you from the full range of experience, isn't it? So,
yeah,
what are we supposed to do with that? And we mentioned right at the beginning, we're looking to break down those blinkers, those barriers to what's possible. So I'm going to offer that as something that we need to look at as well. Is how do you break out of that way of thinking? And putting down, as in taking it from you and giving it a seat somewhere rather than verbally putting it down.
right,
Um, Religion is necessarily problematic because it's so rule based that you can't step out of those rules. And even when you look at something like Wicca,
hmm,
Wicca has a lot of great points to it. It really does. And if you want to learn about witchcraft, Wicca is actually a very interesting direction to go. But if you stay there, then it's very rule based. And it's basically a religion that prides itself in not being the other religions. But
yeah,
all religions do that, right? They all have well, we have the answer and you don't, and therefore, so we're all
mm,
in these little pockets of viewpoints where we're ruled by something that we can't actually contact. Now, is that not an interesting way to avail yourself of what's on the planet or not avail yourself?
Yeah, yeah. It's there's many ways to go from here in my head. I'm
Mm-hmm.
getting
Big one.
go this way, go that way. So my first one is the direct response to what you said, which is, yeah, it's confirmed that most people do have that mentality of following orders.
Mm-hmm.
It's literally one of the reasons why so many people died on 9/11. They sat down with what do you call it? Decision paralysis. They didn't know what to do. So a lot of the people that survived it left early. They were like, okay, there's smoke, there's an alarm, okay, we're out here. And the rest said, well, we'll wait till we get, basically we'll wait till we get orders. Because some of those people made it out, and that's what they were saying. They had decision paralysis.
Mm.
And there was this, I mentioned this on the podcast before. There was an Alaskan cruise ship, or I don't know if it was a cruise ship or just like a day thing. And a lot of people drowned, and the people who, when they went to rescue them, were like, how come there's so many dead people? This makes no sense. That's when they kind of thought of like, I think the number they said was roughly 75% of the population has that follower mentality. And then 15% will lead people to things, but the 10%, if you follow them, they're just they're just out for themselves and that's it. They're the people who drown you when you try to rescue them, when they're swimming.
Uh-huh. Oh, nicely put.
It's not that they're necessarily trying to die, it's just that their way of their self-interest is they just don't have the foresight to lead, but they have the desire to do for themselves. And that instinct kicks in, and that makes them a danger to everyone else. And that's what they figured why there was so many deaths on that particular boat that time.
I just had an image of the Titanic movie
Mm-hmm.
and that scene that gets parodied a lot of she's on the door or
Yeah,
wherever that piece of wood was, and he gets to freeze and die because there's not enough room, and
right.
people are very busy proving how there was enough room,
Yes,
but she just wasn't in a space to let him have that room, or
right.
maybe he wasn't in the space to take it.
Yes.
But
There's both interpretations, very, very much
there's
so.
both interpretations, right? But that speaks to what you were just saying. Just
Mm.
that scene came to mind.
Yeah. Well, because it's a good one, right? Because a lot of people look at it that way. They look at Rose. I think that was her name, right?
Yeah,
That was her
Rose, yeah.
character. She was selfish and she wouldn't let Jack get on. And but you could look at it as Jack didn't want to go on because he wanted to give her the best chance at survival. So he stayed off of it, sacrificing himself for her. Because there's a
They,
chance, right? If they both get on, just because it's big enough, it doesn't mean it's buoyant enough for two of them.
right. So, there's interpretations there, but everybody thinks they have the right one. And
Yeah,
isn't that what we all do, right? And in religion, everybody thinks they have the right one. How can you possibly question my religion?
yeah,
This is the perfect religion. Well, for you it is. I once, let me tell you a story about a Christadelphian. A what now? A
yeah,
Christadelphian. There's like, I don't know, a couple of thousand Christadelphians on the planet, maybe. Maybe they don't even exist now. But it's this little group of people, you could say a cult even,
mm-hmm.
as the name suggests, Christian based. But they have a very narrow view, to the best of my understanding, of what's allowable in the world and what isn't, rules they have to abide by. And so I was a bit of a brat, I have to
Mm-hmm.
say, and I would ask a lot of questions that basically poked the poor soul that I
Right.
worked with no end. And I would ask her, well, where's heaven? And she literally pointed up. And I'm
Mm-hmm.
like, okay, this is cool. You mean on top of clouds? This is so much fun. Where's hell? And and then she literally pointed down, and I was gleeful at this stage. So then I started asking her, well, who goes to heaven? Christadelphians do. Where does everybody else go? Well, they go to hell. Well, what about stillborn babies? What about people with mental disability? What about
Okay.
people with mental illness? And I started, what about people in Africa?
Mm-hmm.
Da-da-da. Who've never heard of what you're talking about. What about
Right.
all those people? And she got so mad. She picked up this very heavy scientific
Mm-hmm.
tome and launched it at my head.
Oh, yeah.
Happily, it missed because it would have hurt. But it was just, she couldn't stand the questions because she didn't have the answers. But And it wasn't fair of me to be doing that, right? To be full disclaimer, I was being a
Yeah.
total brat, but she didn't have the answers, and that drove me nuts that she was following this belief without requiring inquiry. Like she didn't want to know what what she was following. Now, it wasn't really my place to do that, but at the time I didn't have that sense of, each to their own. So I
Mm.
kind of went after her for it. But I remember it well because man, she did not have any answers.
Yeah.
They hadn't given her any.
No, but it's interesting to do that. Like from my side, right? Like I'll tell, like as we commonly say in this podcast, right? You can do religion if you want, but don't stop there. And so, in my opportunities to study other religions, I've taken ideas from here, I've taken ideas from there, and I've brought it into my own spiritual practices, whatever I think is useful and helpful. And I do amuse myself by, taking Saint Anthony to find things. But as I say, hey Tony, I need to find this.
Mm-hmm.
That gets me more a different reaction because sometimes I am kind of doing it without the full respect necessary to given to a spirit you're asking for help, or actually given anyone you're asking for help, right? But uh,
Absolutely.
but the thing is, right? Even when I do that, it's not that he doesn't show me where it is that he's just not as obvious about it. Like I think I had shared I had lost a key for to check the mailbox, and it
Right.
was under the threshold of the door to come in the house, but it was winter, so the threshold was covered in snow, and that's where the key was. And every time I'd come to the door, I'd stop. I don't know why I stopped, but I'd stop and I'd look down. I said, I don't see no key, and I keep walking. And then one day I'm like, okay, I gotta look. And I cleared the snow, and there it was underneath the lip of the threshold.
Right.
So it
So you're
wasn't made
being
obvious to
shown.
me, but I was still stopped at the door.
You were being shown, you just weren't
Right.
having a path dug.
Right. As
Right.
opposed to just walking up to it and going, oh, there it is. It was it's my job to show you. But
Yeah, no, religion has a place and it has a time. And it just depends on whether it's still working
right.
for that person. And if you cannot question it, then I'm always going to call that a
Mm.
problem. Like if you can't
Yeah.
question what you're in. Now, um, Mahayana Buddhism, which is the maroon colored robes, it's
Mm.
Dalai Lama type, that branch, they are very open about the fact that when Buddhism came to the Himalayas, or the Himalayas as
Mm-hmm.
they pronounce, um, the Bon religion was already there, which was animal religion, spirit, animal spirits. And so Buddhism, people bringing in Buddhism said, okay, cool, let's blend them. And so that's what they did was they blended them. Now, all religions do that. It's just these guys are
Right.
honest about it and they don't have a problem with it. And the Dalai Lama was asked once about all the mandalas and all the drawings. And because, boy, if you want to get artwork, that is your
Mm.
religion to look at. And he said, well, this religion is mostly for nomadic animal herders, yak herders and so on.
Mm.
A lot of them can't read. They can interpret the pictures though.
Right.
So we have a lot of imagery to sort of embody the stories that we tell that get the teachings across. So that's how it works. Now that I think as long as it works for you and you can use it in that way, it's great. But what a lot of people misinterpret is they think, oh, well, Buddhists worship Buddha. No, they don't. Buddha was a teacher
Mm-hmm.
and is enlightened, but he's not somebody you worship. So the signs that you see of the hand, the heart, and then bowing down, that is a sign of respect to a teacher.
Right.
But the West misinterprets what they're looking at because they're looking through their own lens of what would it mean if I did that, right? And
Mm.
so we get this misunderstanding going. But as religions go, I think that one is pretty open. There are some versions, such as
Mm.
Theravada, are more hemmed in with what people can and can't do. But the basic premise of Buddhism is very open. It's just what people do with it. And that's where the slave mentality comes in
Mm-hmm.
of, well, somebody has to tell me how to do this. Somebody has to tell me what. and somebody else needs to take the responsibility
Mm.
of my actions.
Right. Yeah. I was gonna, that makes me want to add the idea of like, so again, because I had a trickster teacher, the whole part of being a trickster is to bring chaos to teach something. And so I went for a long time with the, okay, I'm not listening to any spirits. I'm not doing anything when any spirit that comes along and says it's its job to tell me what to do. And now that I work a lot with spirits, I kind of still have a little bit of a conflict of going, why am I listening to you? My whole thing of being, even the guy you guys sent to train me said, never blindly just follow orders. Like, you know,
Right.
but there's something important behind that. One, just to never blindly following gives you the opportunity to make sure you know what you're asked. Because if you follow blindly, you don't ask questions, so you don't even know if you've interpreted the order properly or what you were given properly. But when you follow and at least add a little bit of skepticism, you can kind of say, "Oh, I misinterpreted the first time I heard it, or I didn't hear it right." So then you get the actual thing you're supposed to do, or the actual message you're supposed to get, because you've actually questioned and you've actually explored it, rather than just blindly accepting whatever you were told. But there's also the same
Sometimes,
token. Go ahead.
sometimes just treading cautiously as
Mm-hmm.
you move forward as well, from a place of, am I getting this right? Is
Yeah.
this checking back in for
Mm-hmm.
understanding, like checking in with, is this still the right direction? Like, why is it the right direction? A little question as you step is a good idea, I think.
Right. And it's what I was going to say is too, like it's been my experience with sometimes, or I gave this example before. So people say like, why is it so hard? Well, it's like, think about this. Like, so if you believe you did a contract for how your life's going to be before you start, well, you're not in your human form, right? You're like, oh, okay, so I have to suffer for 10 years through this certain illness. Okay, that's nothing. That'll just be an experience, right? Okay, add that. Okay, that's good. And then you're picking all these things you want to do and all these, oh, I'll learn a lesson doing this. Okay, I'll put that on. And you get excited. And then maybe you overpack how many lessons you're learning, but you're not in a human form. You're not living those moments. You're not suffering at that point. You're just making a choice of what I want to do. But then when you actually have to live those moments, then it's different. Then you're like, and you don't have access consciously to all the things you knew before and all sometimes it leaks, sometimes it'll leak out and you'll like be familiar with a certain place or a certain person without never having met them because there are, I was supposed to meet this person because a little bit of it comes into your mind and you're like, oh, right, that I had to be here for this reason. Okay. But the thing is that you don't, like, even when you make plans to do something, you go, oh, okay, this will suck. I'll have to wait like in line for half an hour or an hour. But then you realize as you're waiting in line, it's like, oh my God, this sucks. Do I really want to be here for an hour? Oh, it's cold now, or it's like it's way too hot of a day to sit in line. All stuff you're like, okay, yeah, I don't care about that. I'll if I have to wait in line, I'll wait in line. But until you're waiting in line, and dealing with the elements and or maybe there's a kid crying behind you, or maybe the person in front of you stinks, maybe like all the things you didn't take into consideration when you made the choice to be in line.
You
Some of those
know,
examples, sure, they're crude, but I mean, they're all very real things that you
well, I
didn't
have
think
one
about.
for you.
But
Childbirth.
mm,
If women remembered the details of how
mm,
childbirth felt, there would be one child and one child only,
yeah,
and nobody would have more, right? It's one of those things where when you're not in the situation, you cannot access what's in that situation. That's kind
right.
of the whole point of coming.
Mm-hmm,
And some of us, I totally agree with your interpretation, actually. And some of us pile on so much thinking, oh, yeah, I'm going to cross all these boxes. Like,
mm-hmm.
I'm going to get all these things done. And when you're living through it, it's like, is this living hell ever going to end?
Yeah,
Like, could we stop now and actually, no, you signed up for this shit, so it's going to
yeah,
keep coming. And the key is, okay, you signed up for it. And that doesn't mean that it doesn't count for anything. Quite the opposite. It means make it count. What are
yeah.
you going to do with the information you got from that thing? And, the way I like to sort of coin my experience so far, at least part of it, is
Mm-hmm,
I had an awful childhood. It was really, really. horrendous, and I wouldn't wish it on the worst person I came across. It was bad. But what happened was I took that information and I started learning about people's behavior and what it meant, how to interpret it before I could really articulate anything. I was a toddler, right? But I
Right.
could figure out what people were likely to do next and base my actions on that. Then as I got older and traveled and lived in different countries, I got to see, oh, different people behave differently in different
Hmm.
circumstances. Da, da, da. I got this breadth that most people don't get to experience in the way I experienced it. So putting all of that together has given me a pretty awesome skill set. Like I'm really pleased with the skill set I have. Now, would I have knowingly lined myself up for all those things if I knew how it was going to feel? I gotta say no, which is
Right.
why we don't know, because we wouldn't get anything done if we did know. And
Yeah.
according to Buddhism, one of the most difficult places you can go spiritually when you die is heaven. Why? Because in Buddhist heaven, and there's different layers of heaven, just like there's
Right.
different layers of hell. But if you're in heaven, you're only in any place that you go to for a while to experience that realm.
Hmm.
And heaven's difficult because there's no challenge. So, what motivates you to get out of there? How do you leave when there's no challenge telling you it's time to go? Hell is difficult because there's lots of challenge, but there's no path. So you've got to figure that out, right? Each realm you go to, whether it's this physical one on earth, whether it's
Hmm.
heaven realms, hell realms, however you want to interpret the places that you can be, each has its challenge, each has its path. And it's not what it seems, right? People think
Yeah.
heaven's the place to go to, but according to Buddhist theory, no, it isn't. It's exactly not, because you can be stuck there for aeons, not realizing that you need to move. You just, you're the frog in the pot kind of thing. I'm not saying you're going to get boiled, but you just don't know when it's time to move
Right.
and time to get your next experiences and your learning. So it's a perspective.
Yeah. So I was gonna say like because that was my part of my main motivation of the day was the how do we kind of break that perception that people have of spirituality and yeah things like heaven, things like hell. It's like the like I said because there is such a dogmatic religious view of it, and because the majority of the population will follow like we're as predators we're pack hunters, but that means the pack follows the lead of the alpha. And I don't mean alpha in the sense of that weird of that study that was done with caged wolves,
Right.
where the alpha like that could be a whole discussion on its own. But basically, to break it down to the alpha is just the one who takes responsibility for the pack. The alpha is not necessarily some lauded figure unless they do well, because an alpha can be ousted, and alpha
Yeah.
doesn't work alone. That's why there's the other, their generals of the alpha who will protect the alpha if they can. But the alpha still has to fulfill a role. The alpha still has to work. The alpha still has to bring in the results. So sometimes leadership is not always what it's kicked up or what it's made out to be either. It's a lot of responsibility. How does that go? To whom much is given, much is expected. So if you take the authority of being an alpha and you take that power, you have work to do.
Mhm. And it's got nothing to do with, look at me, I'm the great person that da da
Right.
da. That's like, no, you don't have time for that. You have work to do, and there's things to be done. But the perspective that I was just
Mm.
mentioning of Buddhism on heaven and hell, I kind of like it because it's just a name, right? Heaven is a name for this experience, and hell is a name for that experience, and they have many layers. And I think it's basically a representation of the spirit world. And what are you going to be doing next? Because you're
Mm-hmm.
always learning and you're always adding to this collective body of knowledge as well as your own journey. And so if you get stuck in one place for too long, I can see how that can be problematic simply because you're not fulfilling your purpose. And I think we always have a purpose, whatever form we're in.
Hmm.
Otherwise, there is no purpose, and that doesn't work. There kind of has to be a purpose of some sort.
Yeah, it's funny because it makes me think of, so you can grab wisdom from any source, right? And we discussed when we were doing a podcast yesterday. So I don't know if this will be heard by the time this is out, but so making references to fictional works to help explain a point, which is a lot of what religion does, and it's what a lot of people do to get their points across. And I had owned a game at one point. It was a role playing game, the tabletop variety, where you had pens and paper, and you could play a Taoist immortal. And in the description of the Taoist immortal, because the people who published this particular game, whoever the editor is, the guy loves to editorialize and loves to tell a lot of stories. And so when he's talking about the Taoist immortal, like the Taoist immortal character has been through already a bunch of incarnations. You're on a path at this point. You die, you come back, you die, you come back, and your character builds as it dies and comes back. But there's a point in the Taoist immortal's journey where the Jade Emperor offers him a place in heaven as an honored guest, and there you would stay for eternity. Working with the with forget what it's called, but I know there's the celestial court. But your job as a Taoist immortal is to refuse it because your journey's not over. As far as you've come at this point, and even though you've impressed the gods, you're not done. And
Mm-hmm.
it's a very bad thing for Taoist immortal to take the invitation. So going with your saying about heaven, it's the this is a game perspective, right? So it's a story and it's there to build up and make you think about things. But even
Mm-hmm.
like in that one, they talk about how you shouldn't stop your development just because you're going to get riches and rewards.
Yeah, you should never stop you. Well, okay, don't shoot on yourself, but
Yeah.
in my perspective,
Mhm.
the whole point of being alive is that you don't stop your journey.
Right.
Um, and in Buddhism, again, as that seems to be coming up today, you have bodhisattvas. Bodhisattvas are beings who have, or people who have attained enlightenment and have taken a vow to continue their reincarnation on Earth to support other people toward their enlightenment. So they could become Buddhas and not come back, which
Right.
is what everybody professes to want, right?
Hmm.
Whenever you talk to somebody, I'm not coming back. And a lot of people in the spiritual realms will, you can hear them saying that. Well, this is my last time on earth and I'm not coming back. And I always find that such an interesting concept because, yeah, yeah, you are. But
Because
but
you said that, you're coming back.
it's not a one shot and done.
Yeah.
Um, not at all. But that's bodhisattvas is like the Taoist immortal way. You can be enlightened and not come back, but isn't it a higher calling to come back and help others
Mm-hmm.
find their enlightenment? So it's a choice though, just like for the Taoist immortal. So I wonder if that story even came from Buddhism or not.
Well,
Like
that's what I'm
I know
wondering, right? Yeah.
I'm sure
Because
there's other places for these stories.
because I mean, like I said, the guy likes to editorialize and he likes to tell a lot of stories, but he also likes to put his own spin on stuff because
Hmm.
it's a game and they're publishing it and they have to have unique content for themselves. But what was I going to say? It made me think to give you a very real example that people go through in this very material world and don't realize. So you do martial arts, for an example. Those who have a belt-based system and they do black belt, everyone, the general populace is like, oh my God, black belt, that's it. You've hit the cream of the crop, the top. It's like, but all black belt means is you've done basic competency. You have now learned all the things we need you to learn to be basically competent. Where you go from your black belt, that's where your real journey begins.
Right. But also the belt system is how you get people to come in and
Yes.
stay in because it's just like in behavior analysis where you give the reinforcement. Reinforcement, you want a behavior to continue, you reinforce it. And here you go, you earned your next belt. There's your reinforcement. Here
Yeah.
you go, you earned your etc. And competitions and having trophies at the end of the competition and that
Mm-hmm.
kind of thing. It, if you think about it, none of it is necessary per se, except you want to keep pulling that person along in the journey you've got them on, and you use reinforcement for that.
Well, that's exactly how, like, so the place I studied when I first started, because I did Shotokan karate, then I did a bit of Tai Chi and I did a bit of Taekwondo. But the teachers I had in Shotokan, uh, one time we had actually all the Grand Masters come, and the guy who actually was the head of it was like, oh no, it wasn't him. It was actually my teacher that I had, and he was explaining during one of those talks, and he was saying like, we do belts for one reason and one reason only: to be competitive in the world. People need to hit plateaus. He says, all but what you're really doing is you're climbing a mountain, you know. So there's always someplace to go. There's always someplace to go, you know. He says, but he says in the modern world, people need plateaus that they achieve. So we give belts.
Hmm.
And I thought, well, that's interesting because you're you're basically saying, yeah, the belts are bullshit, but we need to bring people in.
Basically, yes.
And I was like, thanks for telling me. You're, like, but it was a weird thing. I was in high school at the time, and I was like, that's some fairly honest marketing there.
It is. And I mean, think of school and degrees, right? And I think I can definitely speak to this one, that a degree is basically a piece of paper that you earn that says, I studied somebody else's stuff up to
Mhm.
this level of competency, and I get a piece of paper to show for that. Now, other people make it mean a whole heap of things, some of which may be true and some of which isn't. I mean, it does show an ability to learn, and it does show an ability to remember, or depending on how you're doing your degree, maybe it shows problem solving, that kind of thing. But it doesn't show any sort of human qualities really of like, well, where's your heart in this, or how are you going to use this information, do you know how to apply it, is frequently not there. Now, in nursing, for example, years ago, it was earn as you learn. So you would
Mhm.
literally be working on the ward, go and do some school, back on the ward, school, back on the ward. And so you'd get the theory and then immediately immersed in practice, theory, practice. And then they moved that model into, now you're going to do everything in university, and you might have some
Yeah.
manicures to play with, and then you qualify and suddenly you're shoved in the hospital and expected to be competent. Well, I can tell you, I would, if I had to go to hospital, I would infinitely prefer the nurse who has gone through the earn as you learn system and not the university based nurse,
Right.
because one knows the theory and the other one actually knows how people work. And the two things are actually not the same. But we give all this importance to the process of, well, you've completed these stages through the program and you end up with your certification, and that means da 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 da, right? Like we make it mean a whole lot of things. But does it though? Because there's some brilliant people who never did go to university,
Right.
and there's some real jerks who, don't know as much as you would expect them to, who did go to university. So what does it mean? And if you look at the state of the Ivy League universities in the US right now, I got to tell you, given based on the behavior of the people in charge of those universities for the last 12 months or so, I would not give you a thank you
Mm.
for a piece of paper from any of those places. And in fact, I was supposed to go and speak at
Right.
Harvard, and I
Mhm.
declined because I frankly didn't want to spend the money traveling to get there. Like,
Right.
I didn't want to spend the time because they are they're not living up to the hype. They're not
Right.
who they pretend to be. And the piece of paper confuses people into thinking, oh, but they're this great bunch of people. No, they really aren't.
Well, I was going to say you can even stretch it back to, well, you can almost stretch it back to forever, but was it 2016 when basically it was all the nepotism entries into these Ivy League schools?
Ah,
Like that?
yes, there was a big thing with that too. And yeah, oh, you can stretch it back all the way. But I mean, it's so
Yeah.
obvious now, and I think this is part of the shift that's coming up, that's in
Yeah.
process now, is we're starting to see the reality of things that we've been blind to. And some of that is this, Ivy League education. Is it actually that highly sought after, amazing thing?
Yeah.
I'm going to say no, I don't think so. And some of the studies that have come out of these places, if you look back over
Yeah.
time at some of the more controversial researchers, for example, oh, here we see Ivy League universities again. Let me think.
Yeah.
Pattern here?
Yeah.
Yes.
That's yeah. That leads me to something I keep trying to tell people. Like, so during the pandemic, right? Follow the science, follow the science, follow the science. And I'm like, okay, well, I followed the science I knew before, and it told me to be cautious of just taking a newly formulated vaccine, you
Hmm.
know. But the amount of visceral, but like, even like all the people who are supposed to represent the medical field, you know, like just the non-science from that bunch, like the you can't take I can't think of the name of it there, the horse dewormer, quote unquote. I'm like, you mean the medicine doctors have been prescribing for forever, and people outside the influence of the American Medical Association have been still giving to people when they got COVID? You mean that medication that's been for human beings since its conception? That's now, an animal medicine that we can't use. I'm like, well, what about all the other medicines that used to be just for humans that are now being given to animals? Are those now just for the animals and we don't use them anymore? Like,
Yeah. And oh, there's so many questions with that. But this is again, I think this is part of how we are now seeing things
hmm,
that have been shrouded in a sort of conspiracy, if you will. I don't love the word because of how it gets used, but
yeah,
a sort of a coming together of illusions,
hmm,
a conspiracy of illusions, if you will, that we've been happy to believe in and happy to follow, like, oh, this is irreproachable because it's a religion or because it's science or because this group of people who are in this fancy building say so, and we've attributed power and reason to places where it doesn't belong.
yes. Or what is it? To boost the idea. So I was gonna say, so to boost the idea that since I'm currently functioning under the whole rise of the divine feminine, there was an article I was reading, and they were talking about how doctors make mistakes sometimes. And one of the examples they used was a mother had come up, like her son had broken his arm. This was like a long time ago, and she ended up improvising a splint for him and a whatever you call it there,
Sling.
yeah, sling. And so the doctor's like impressed to go, oh, a mother's instinct. And the lady was kind of like, no, I saw how his arm was. I saw what was happening with him. And I thought, hey, this would hurt. This would work. So it wasn't instinct. It was just, I reasoned it out. I looked at the situation and I figured it out, you know? And that's the origin of all bodies of knowledge. You looked at the situation, you reasoned it out, and you came up with it. But the doctors didn't want to accept that she had the intelligence because at the time it's like, well, women work on instinct; they don't work on intellect. And I'm like,
And
that's people right in high with Ivy League educations, all these higher educations, and they're like couldn't reason the simple concept of yes, women also have intelligence.
and yeah, and it's interesting that if even if it was her intuition, that's less than your external sort out
Right.
learning. Because why? Because somebody else at some point came up
Mhm.
with that learning,
Yeah.
right? At some point it was novel, and at some point they had to persuade people to listen to them. And I've looked at behavior analysis and the background of the studies that we base a lot of what we do, and they're single case studies. That's well known. That's not a shock. Like, it's out there, right? You can look it up, and there it is, single case studies. So you can have evidence-based practice
Right.
based on less than a dozen people. And sometimes scientists get into feuds, and their research is aimed at annoying the living blazes out of the other scientist. And you can actually follow, if you want to follow the science, follow that. It's
Mhm.
hilarious. I've done it. I had a mentor that said, "Do you want to see this?" And kind of, and he was there for a bunch of
Mhm.
this stuff. So he showed me. And it was utterly fascinating. But if you look at in the field that I'm in, you got B.F. Skinner,
Mhm.
Noam Chomsky. And those two guys slugged it out all the way through until B.F. Skinner was on the planet no longer. But
Right.
they hotly disputed all of their theories with each other, and each was producing research to validate their side and annoy the other side. And
Mhm.
they did that all the way through. They're not an exception. It happens
Yeah.
everywhere, right? Scientists are humans and they just have this particular mode to use to prove a point, if you will.
Mhm.
So some science is legit and accurate, and some of it is, frankly, one-upmanship, or
Mhm.
let's just say the statistics have been tortured until they say what you want them to say.
Yeah.
And that happens a lot. The key is figure out what you're following. What are you looking at? And does it make sense? Who paid for it? You know, where does it come from? Conflicts of interest, all that kind of thing. But I think this is becoming more visible. It's getting
Yeah.
easier to see. And the key is to not go into the all or nothing thinking of, well, some scientists do this, therefore they all do this. That doesn't help you any more than thinking all scientists are correct. Like,
Right.
neither of those extremes are where we need to be. But again, human beings love their extremes.
Yeah. It's I had something. The energy is there.
Was it a lie?
No, but it might be unnecessary. All I was going to say is like, so part of what brought us to this, making this episode, and the thing we've been repeating for season three, even if this comes out before season three for some reason, is the things aren't what you think they are. You know, it's not what it appears to be. And are you what you appear to be? And this is the same. Like, I've been living in this world where there's no absolute authority on anything. And I've been living in this world for decades now. So I forget that people actually do live in a world where they have authorities, where they do have people they go to, and say, oh, this person is infallible in this place. And it's like, no, that's not even possible, first of all. But it's like this. So I live in a world where I look at, does this, like, can I see this as making sense? And do I see it when you apply it in the real world? Does it make sense? So I do. Like I said, I borrow from a religion. If this thing works, then I borrow it from that religion. If this thing works, I borrow it from that one. If this thing works, I borrow it from that spiritual practice. If this makes sense, I borrow it from that scientific study. If this works, I borrow it from that scientific, idea. And
Which
so
is
that's how I live my
exactly,
life because I know not everything is full. And if I make a mistake, then I do something new.
and this is exactly what the Buddha is reputed to have said. He's, hear all the things, see all the things, and then if you find it to be good, take it and use it. And if it doesn't work for you, then put it to one side. And you're doing exactly that. That wisdom it's ancient wisdom, and I still find it to be good, so I take it and use it.
Yeah.
Like it's a
Well,
good.
that's the thing, right? Uh, I know growing up for myself, the idea of evolution was it was linear and you went from this is the worst form of the thing and this is the superior form of the thing. But evolution is really adapting to your environment.
Mhm.
So we're not going to end up at the end of the world, at the end of the line where human beings don't evolve anymore and they've got giant heads and basically can alter reality and read minds and. But science
Yeah.
fiction wise, that's been the trajectory we've always been told. Like that's been the message since I was a little kid. But really, it's not that. It's why perfection isn't possible because once you become perfect, if that's possible, something's going to change in response to that, and therefore your perfection is lost because this thing is adapting to your perfection.
Yeah, I'm solidly behind the thought that perfection doesn't exist, and I don't know anybody that's achieved it. I would be extremely skeptical if somebody claimed to have achieved it because it wouldn't be true. It would be a false claim somewhere. Like even if you think of physical appearance, if somebody's achieved perfection, they've probably had plastic surgery and they've done a whole bunch of other things that are not quote unquote natural. So, and even then, is it really perfect?
Mm,
Because no, every day, even if you've had the most incredible plastic surgery, every day you're getting a day older. Some part, some cell is not replacing itself, something is not working as it should. So, is it possible? No, we're not here to be perfect. The whole concept of perfection is a distraction. There are so many distractions on this planet, and that's a good one because people get seduced by the idea of being perfect. I'm going to look perfect. I'm going to be the perfect size. I'm going to be the, I don't know, I'm going to be the perfect cook. I'm going to be the perfect this, that, and the other. And it's like, for whom?
yeah,
Because we all would have a different view. Like you could cook the most amazing Indian food ever, and if somebody tastes it who prefers Italian, then it's not good food, right? Your
right.
perfection is lost. It's not possible. It's not a thing. We don't have it, but people keep looking for it, and it's like, give yourself a break. Like
Hmm.
it's not there. What else could you be doing while you're wasting your time looking for perfection?
Yeah, it's the so the thing that sprouted, I'll say it again. The thing that sprouted this is because things aren't what they're meant, what you think they are. And I think part of the big thing to be put across is that don't look at the spirit world like it's something you have to aspire to. You are spiritual. That's just you are. That's what you are. Right now, you're wrapped, quote unquote, in a meat suit, but you are. You don't
Living.
have to. You don't have to. You don't have to do anything to acquire that spirituality. You are spiritual in that sense. So if that's the only thing you're thinking about, if that's your only goal for doing spiritual stuff, well, you're that. Just wait
Oh,
till
and thank you, because you just prompted for me. I'd like to say you do not need to do anything, be anything, think anything in order to be worthy.
you. Right.
Again, that is not a real concept. You are worthy because you are, and that's
Mm-hmm.
it. You don't have to do, be, say, think anything. It's you're there already, so you can put that one down and tick the box if you like, because there's nothing you need to do. You're simply there.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing, right? Like it's we strive for so many things to match an image, and there's nothing wrong with like doing a comparison to see where you are and what things you could acquire. That itself is fine, but it's the when it's your only thing. Like the your biggest competitor is you, right? Don't worry about beating someone else. Worry about beating where you were before, so you can get better than you were. But the
That's
thing
my
is, yeah,
preference. That's my preference because when
yeah,
you start using external imagery as your guide,
mm,
you have to know that that is always flawed
right,
because you're only seeing it from your perception.
hmm,
You can't see it from anything else. So whatever is painting on your lens right now is going to color what you see. So, I work with, just like you do, I work with clients who want to lose weight, get healthier, and so on. And absolutely, that's a legit thing. You got to look after the body you're in. So, 100%, yep, good thing to do. But I've heard more than one person say things along the lines of, why is it so easy for everybody else and they can eat whatever they want and they look amazing? And then I'll ask them to show me this paragon, who is this person? And once or twice it's happened that a client has said this about another client in a group
mm,
situation. So obviously I know the situations for each of
right,
them. I'm like, oh, you have no idea what's going on behind the scenes for this other person. They might look like everything's easy, but that's only because you're not looking. They actually have, this chronic disease. They have this life-threatening thing. They got financial problems, like whatever else it is.
right,
They have a whole lot of baggage that you would not actually want to pick up, but we just see the parts that we want to see, and then assume that everything else is perfect as well. And then we're left feeling like, oh no, I can't be like this person who has everything. When I lived in Malaysia and did that fitness wall, the wall of
Right.
fitness models that I've mentioned before, I did that because people would see a fitness model on the cover of a
Mm.
magazine or something and say, oh, I want to look like her. She's incredible. I want to be like that person. It's like, well, she's up at 5 in the morning, working out, eating this way, that way, working out again and again and again. And by the way, she had breast cancer.
Mm.
So are you here for all of that?
Yeah.
And when they realize that the pretty picture is just that, it's like, yeah, maybe you don't want to buy everything that's being sold here, right? Maybe that isn't perfection. So just improving you, for your experience, I think we need to spend more time there and less time worrying about what's going on social media, etc.
Yeah. It's funny. You know what? We did hit on a point that I keep getting dogged by the idea of things aren't what they appear to be and really find out what they are. And part of the big thing, like I said, like I've been living this life of for decades of there's no pure authority, there's no one true authority on anything. Take what you can from that. And that's, I think, the big message here is take that ancient piece of wisdom, put it in your life. And yeah, it's scary at first, right? Because you've been spending your time saying, oh, this person is infallible. So therefore, they can teach me. I just got to do what they say and I'll be perfect. And it's like, well, no. One of my big arguments for getting vaccinated or not getting vaccinated is was they didn't test the drug on me. So I have no idea how it's going to react with me and my situation and how I do things. Like statistics are for a group. They're not for individuals. Yes, individuals make up a group, but they're still not for an individual.
Not at all. And statistics could be made to say whatever you want them to say. You just alter the question until it gives you the answer,
Yeah.
right? That's how it works. So you have a set of statistics you can look at. Now, what do you want to do with that? And correlation, as opposed to causation, oh my God, correlation is so
Yeah.
easy to do. You can draw parallels between two completely unrelated things and make it work. It's very, very easy to do. So it's the thing is, I think we need to be prepared. Human beings generally, people listening to this, need to be prepared to rethink your identity in light of new information. So if that infallible person, if that hero, if that piece of solid information is found out to be flawed, what does that mean about you? How do you relate to that? And how can you relate differently now you have new information? Because a lot of people, let's go politics. We haven't done that for a little bit. But a lot of people with politics will identify so strongly with their political side that if they're shown something to say, well, this person is complete slime,
Right.
then they can't accept it. They can't see that because it calls into question everything that they're currently standing for.
Yeah.
But you didn't always stand for that. So what else could so you can identify differently. What else can you do? And can you identify as somebody who says, overall, I like where this person's going and they have some flaws? Or, because that kind of understanding is where there's a possibility for communication on all sides, right? So for the record, the election that we had recently,
Mm-hmm.
I think, I feel, I believe, my understanding is that both sides have some pretty deep flaws, and
Yes.
we're going to reap the repercussions of why people chose who they chose. That is going to be showing up, and it simply is, and it would have done whichever way it went. But it's not only are the candidates and the parties flawed, but nobody's looking at it because you can't question that. You're either right
Yeah.
or you're wrong. You're on this side or you're on that side. But you can't question, well, why does this person say this? Or how about you do that thing differently? And if they don't learn those lessons, it's going to keep going on repeat. These cycles that we have right now are going to go on repeat, and it's not going to end well. So there are lessons there to learn, but people's identities are so locked in that they
Yes.
can't learn them. So this is again where those blinkers have to come off and the awareness that it's not what it seems. Like, what else could it be? And ask some
Yeah.
questions and be open to getting the answers. Like, what else could it be? I saw memes going around at one point for the left saying,
Right.
with a Kamala Harris in a power pose and
Right.
saying, repost this if you've got her back.
Hmm.
Every time I saw that, I would post a comment underneath saying, never mind that, does she have mine?
Yeah.
And people didn't like the question, and I would do similarly to the other side as well. And I would pose questions. Well, how's that going to look? Or what are we going to do with that? And people didn't like it because I questioned what they've identified so strongly with. But it doesn't exist. What they're identifying with isn't really there. Do I need to have a politician's back? Are you
Yeah.
serious? I don't need to have any politician's back, especially if they don't have mine. So how have we lost that? But it's that whole thing of, well, we have to have somebody to look up to. This person's going to take care of everything. And if you listen to the narrative now, everybody's saying, oh, this is all going to be fixed. It's going to be so great. And we're going to have all these things. And I'm just like,
Yeah.
we,
Because they
we,
didn't look at your side.
because I don't know what they're looking at actually, but it's sure as hell not the train wreck I'm looking at.
Yeah.
But
Well, go ahead.
again, either side would have been problematic
Yeah.
because nobody's asking those questions and demanding answers.
Yeah.
We
You
got to
know,
look at it a different
yeah.
way.
Well, that's the thing, right? Like, I think one thing I want to add in is that if someone disagrees with you about a certain part, like say of a candidate as an example, that you like and that they also like, but they point out a flaw, they're not betraying you and they're not your enemy. They're just sharing something they noticed. Because I find this right now with political discussions, it's like I usually vote a certain way. And when I'm talking to the people on that side, if I see something, oh well, this candidate actually did this, they're like, oh well, since when did you start supporting the other one? I'm not supporting the other one. I just assume you still remember that I still feel a certain way about that candidate as well. But I'm just happening to be pointing out in this instance that the candidate we would usually vote for also has some flaws.
And that's exactly what I've been doing. And the response I get is the same. I've had people yelling at me for voting for the wrong side. And it's like, I have studiously not told anybody who I voted for because it's
Right.
none of your damn business, for one thing. But that's also not the point. What I'm telling you is they both have serious flaws. Could we look at this, please, so that we can get something maybe more centrist that can
Mm-hmm.
work for more people? Because right now we have this massive division. Why? Because everybody's so stuck in their identities and their identities are based on somebody else, right? That they will make any amount of twaddle fit. And it's a sight to behold and a train wreck in action. And you can look at either track. It's a hot mess. And people are encouraging it by not questioning what they're looking at, not looking at it differently, not taking the blinkers off. And
Yeah,
it impacts everybody.
that's right. And that's what's going to stop people from moving forward. The
Hmm.
inability to, one, realize what's being said to them when they're being told something. Again, like listen, I'm currently politically on your side. So the reason I'm not pointing out the other guy is because we all collectively know why the other guy sucks. So do I need to keep repeating it?
Exactly. Yeah.
And and listen, our guy's not that awesome either. So you have to pay attention to the things that they've done as well.
Yes. What can we change there?
Right.
What can we ask for differently? I've I see people, I have people I'm in touch with on both sides of the fence there. And I see people on the left, they are posting, doom messages and, yelling about everything. And I see points in what they're saying. I also see a whole lot of wasted energy. Like, why don't you, instead of yelling about all the things that are happening that you don't like, how about having a look at why we're here? Why is this happening? What was missing from your side that caused this to be a thing? How did we end up here? Yelling about it is a waste of energy.
Yeah,
Look at what happened. Now, likewise, for the other side, okay, you're where you wanted to be. Now what?
yeah,
Now where's the accountability? Where is the burden of responsibility? And how are you going to handle that? Again, yelling about Nina, Nina, Nina,
yeah,
we won. Okay, that doesn't inspire me with confidence. Can I hear something more useful? And it's such an interesting thing. But again, I think a lot of it's bogged down in people's identities as, well, I have to be this or I have to be that. Now, full
yeah,
disclaimer, I have an advantage because I'm not from here. I came
right,
into here. So it's just like when I watch football, and I love American football, but I will watch anybody play. I don't care about, I have teams I like more than others, but
right,
I'm a very flexible, right? Because I didn't grow up in a town where everybody had to support the one team. So I understand I'm coming in with a different perspective on all kinds of things because it's a different culture. But still,
yeah,
I'm kind of holding my flashlight up here and saying, hey guys, have a look at the thing.
yeah. Well, to add to your thing, I when I watch sports, it's the same thing. Even if I have a favorite team, whichever team gives me the best bang for my buck, that's the team I
Mhm.
like.
Exactly.
If I go watch something and it's a good game and it gives me the drama I need to get the adrenaline going, and I see some really good sportsmanship and I see some really good talent, that's what I'm going to be
Mhm.
excited about. I don't care if they're on the team I like or the team I don't like. If I get that game, that's what I want.
Yep. And just to go with the football thing for a moment, it's interesting that so there's this player, and this player is really, really excellent receiver, for example, but
Mm.
then they move to a different team. Well, you don't follow them, you stick with your team, right? So whoever comes in that place, good or not, you're still going to go with that team. And
Yeah.
it's an interesting, I mean, you can argue loyalties and all kinds of things, but I find it interesting that the key components
Mm.
can change, but the shell is what's supported. These are the colors, this is the
Yeah.
location. And it's interesting to me to see that in action again, because I'm from that place of
Mm.
I don't feel compelled to follow one particular thing. Like okay, should I be a Denver supporter? Well, actually, I think Bo Nix is an excellent quarterback. I'm kind of enjoying watching him, but I didn't like them at all the last few years. I thought they
Yeah.
sucked. But it was the quality of the play. So,
Hmm.
I anyway, that's all of an aside, but it's
Yeah.
just different perspectives. And I appreciate that I have an advantage when it comes to looking at things differently because I'm not from here.
Mm. Something you said reminded me of this is my favorite moment in politics I've ever seen. Maybe there were better moments, I don't know. But this was during the 2008 election when John McCain was doing a rally, and a woman, an older, she had to be, well, I don't know how old she was, but she's an elderly woman, and she was, kind of in tears and kind of, oh, I don't want Obama to win. He's a Muslim. He's going to ruin the country and whatever. And he kind of addressed her directly and said, listen, and actually defended his opponent.
Mhm.
And I thought I've never seen that in any politics anywhere, where someone actually spoke well of their opponent in a very serious sense when they're seeing someone so out of sorts and so broken. overall the Discord and actually took a moment to be human and say, listen, I know we're arguing up here, but he's not a monster. He's not the monster you think he's in your head. He's just another person.
Right. And yeah, she completely misunderstood who and what he was. And I love that he had that sort of moment of humanity rather than being a politician. It speaks very well for him as a human
Mm-hmm.
being and from where he was coming from. And we don't see that now, which is unfortunate. And I don't think we saw it a lot then, honestly.
No,
But there were rules. There aren't any rules now. And that's part of the shift that's happening, right? Is those rules aren't as solid as we thought they were. And even when they are patently broken, it doesn't matter. It
yeah,
doesn't matter. What you think is going to come next doesn't come next. So you have some choices now. You can look at that and scream about it and say how wrong it is, or you can look at that and kind of get up on your toes and say, okay, where do we go from here? Because this is a thing. Where do we go from here? Spending time on the rights and wrongs of it, unless you actually think something's going to change, um, let's focus on where we go from here. That's going to be important.
yeah,
What are you going to do next? What are you going to do given the changing information? And I think
yeah,
that's so important to know. What are you going to do given that change? It's ah, we do have some interesting shifts coming up on all fronts, like
yeah,
just every level you can think of. The medical system is no longer viewed the way it used to be, right? Because it no longer is the way it used to be. When I was a kid, you would go to the doctor if you were dying. Like if something was hanging off,
mm-hmm.
you would probably go to the doctor, maybe. And now it's like I have a sore throat. I'm going to the doctor. You wouldn't do that previously. And then with all the chemicals and all the crap that's in our food, this is an assault on the body that doctors are not equipped to handle. They don't know. That it's not in their training. And how many years do you expect them to train for? Not only that, but it's not in their realm to work on that. This is a new thing. And doctors aren't equipped for that. They're equipped to deal with your symptoms and to respond to emergencies. They're not equipped to deal with what food does to you or food products do.
Yeah.
It's not their fault. It's simply how it is.
Well, that's what I was going to say, right? Because food changes. Like, I remember I had a subscription to Men's Health, and one of the articles was if you've noticed that you haven't changed your diet in the last 20 years, but yet now you're a lot fatter, they go, we'll tell you why. And then it goes through and it lists and it talks about high fructose corn syrup. It's like when it was just fructose, you burned it off. But combined with corn syrup and under the now the combination of high fructose corn syrup, it doesn't burn fast. It stays on you. It doesn't burn off like it used to do. So you're
Well,
gaining weight, and the fact that now, because it's cheaper to make high fructose corn syrup, you're getting more amount. You're getting more of it. And so it
and
was like,
high fructose corn syrup was accidentally developed in a lab in Japan in the 70s. It was never intended for human consumption. It was
right,
purely an accident. But then, of course, the food companies discovered that, hey, this does the job of sugar, only a lot cheaper.
mm-hmm.
Let's use it. But your body was not in on that discussion. Your
Nope.
body did not get to say, I have no idea what the hell that is. I don't recognize it. I can't use it. I'm going to store it, and you're going to have inflammation. It- that has happened on so many levels. And yeah, I think the 70s was probably a pretty big turning point,
Yeah.
but we've gone downhill while standing still, and it's just not looking at what's there.
Well, and that's the whole point, right? Like, so even if you don't change your diet, there's things going on, like practices around food, right? Like, if you don't let, even like, say, oranges, they have to sit on a tree for a little while to get vitamin C. You can't
Right.
pluck them before that time. If you pluck them before that time, they never get vitamin C. So, or the ascorbic acid. So, the orange you think is helpful and is going to give you vitamin C, you're not getting your vitamin C from. So you can say, "Oh my God, I'm doing everything perfect," but yet I'm still getting scurvy and I'm still getting all these symptoms. It's like, yeah, because the food itself that you're eating has changed.
and where it's coming from.
Yeah.
And just so many practices. But when farmers have to wear hazmat suits in order to plant seeds, you know you have a problem.
Mm,
When farmers have to put all their potatoes in a warehouse and don't go eat while wearing hazmat suits, and then don't go near them for 6 weeks while they off gas before
mm-hmm.
sending them to certain fast food chains because they give you that nice long French fry in the packet, right?
Okay.
Does anybody ever stop to think what potatoes look like that? Especially bred and chemically fed
Mm,
potatoes like that.
right.
But when that happens to your food, what do you think it's doing to your body? But we're typically just accepting without questioning.
Yeah.
And just it seems to be perfect looking French fries in a packet, therefore it is. But it isn't, is it? That's not what it is. So I hope that whoever's listening to us gets some more insight into areas where they can question.
Yes.
And it's not to be scaremongering, it's more to say, hey, what's behind this door and what's behind that door? Let's take a flashlight and go have a look because it makes a difference to your quality of life. It makes a difference to your experience and how you're going to conduct yourself. Because when the time comes for you to look back over your life and
Mm,
say, this is what I did, you might want to make it a good story.
yeah. Yeah. So I was going to say that throw in reminded me of something I did with my nephew one time. So he would leave his clothes on the ground. And my sister was like, "Oh my God, he doesn't listen. Can you do something?" And I like, so I went to him and I said, "Okay, listen, I'm going to do you a big favor. I have now removed the rule that requires you to throw your clothes on the ground. You are now free to put them away, when you're done. Now you're no longer under the tyranny of, that rule." Well, he laughed. And then after that, he started picking up his clothes because he thought that was hilarious. So for the
Right.
listeners on this podcast, we are going to do you a big favor. The tyranny that didn't allow you to read before and do things out of your own interest and your own curiosity, you now have the permission to go do it, things from your own curiosity. Find out if something you think is weird or not, or is true or not true, or good for you or bad for you. Do it. Do it on your own. Look, go and find it out for yourself. Talk to people. See what's out there.
And here's the thing, if it's good for you, then what you now know is that
Mm.
it's good for you. It
Yeah.
doesn't mean everybody else has to follow what you're saying. You can let them know your experience, but let go of the expectation that they're going to follow your experience
Right.
because that's what we're looking at not doing is following everything, right? We're getting lost with all this following, getting kind of
Mm.
stuck in the maze there. And this is an opportunity. Danielle just gave you permission.
Mm.
You have the opportunity now to look behind that door, to make different decisions, but you're doing it for you. That's
Right.
the thing. It's actually important to do it for you. And then other people will see you living your life the way you're living it. And if they like what they see, they might ask you some questions. That's a great time to share what you know. Shoving it in people's faces is never going to work. It's a lot like telling someone to calm down when they're in a bad mood. You are likely to get smacked. That's just how it works. So, but you have the freedom to explore. You have the freedom to know that it's not what it seems. So, what else is it? And
Yeah.
it's like, it's no massive conspiracy theory. It's just literally straight up. What do you find?
Well, I'm glad you said conspiracy again. So, just for everyone to be reminded, a conspiracy means more than one person is working on something or conspiring to do something. That's what it means. It doesn't mean ridiculous. It doesn't mean far fetched. It just literally means that a group of people have gotten together to do this thing. That's
And
what
I
the
think
word conspiracy means.
that's important because
Yeah,
these days, if if somebody says, well, that's a conspiracy, then you need to put your tinfoil hat on.
right.
But really, or is that just a way of ridiculing something you haven't spent time looking at?
Yeah, I was gonna say, and if you need authority to let yourself to agree with this statement, look in a law book. It defines conspiracy. What conspiracy is. So the important no, well, I guess that was the important message because I had a whole thing ready to come out. What was I gonna? Oh. Okay, so you said conspiracy, and or sorry, not tinfoil hat. Nah, it's gone. It's gone.
Oh
So I guess
my
that
God.
was the important thing was the understanding what the word actually means. It just means people conspired. I always like to use the example of if you don't think people conspire, just look in your own life and look at what you've done. Just look at your own existence, the things you've done over the years. You've conspired to do things. Sometimes good stuff, sometimes bad stuff.
I
And
want to offer another word.
what's that?
If the person thinking of conspiracy has an issue with it and they think it
Mm,
means nut job in a tinfoil
mm.
hat and yada yada, I invite you to change the word conspiracy to collaboration. Now, how
Yes,
does it sit?
yes,
What does that look like now? This person's into collaborations.
yeah,
Okay. That doesn't seem to be a problem, does it?
yeah. Because the reason I brought it up is because that's one way of automatically diffusing anyone. Like I'll tell people, right? Like if I ever personally wanted to hide something very important from people, I would tell the least trustworthy person, the person who's perceived as being the least trustworthy. I would tell them, especially if I knew they would lie to everybody, because that person is untrustworthy. The minute they tell everyone, everyone's going to automatically assume it's not true.
Which is kind of agnotology in action. And agnotology is something that the listener should look up if they haven't yet, because there's
He
actually
has mentioned it.
I mention it periodically, but just in case they haven't heard it before,
Mm-hmm.
it's the study of how big organizations such as big pharma, food companies, the government, and pick one, any country, right? How these organizations sow doubt and disinformation to diffuse the correct information. So when you get a study that comes out and says fluoride's toxic and it does really bad things to you and can cause fetal abnormalities, etc., as soon as that study comes out, there will be half a dozen more studies from studies in air quotes from wherever saying, oh, fluoride's great. There's no evidence. Da, 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 da. Well, that's actually deliberately sown misinformation. So that what happens is you get so flooded with these studies and they're all conflicting that the person is likely to say, oh, this is all crap. I'm not listening to any of it. This is ridiculous. One study says this and five say that. I'm going to go with the five. But if you took the time and the interest to look at those five, see who produced them, who paid
Mm-hmm.
for them, and when, compared to the study that says the unpopular thing, you might discover the origin of the misinformation. And this happens all the time. If a confused person is going to say no. So if you want to keep that person buying your product and not realizing that you're filling it full of toxins, then whenever something points to toxins, you bring a whole lot of confusion out there. So the person who already buys your product says, "Oh, I'm not going to listen to any of that. I love my happy um, horseshoes, like however you want to call it, right? Trying not to name that brightly colored cereal. But
Yeah.
people are going to just go for the thing that's familiar and dismiss doubts because they've been given the opportunity to kind of ignore it.
Mm-hmm.
Smokescreen. This is very intentional on the part of all of the organizations. All the big ones do it. This is how they control the money flow. That's a collaboration theory for you.
Yeah. It
But you
makes me
can
think.
find it. It's
Yeah.
easy to find. It's not hidden. It's just people have to be bothered to look.
Yeah. What's the thing, right? Information is put out there sometimes. Like that's a big problem of our time right now. We have access to tons and tons and tons of information,
And a
and
lot of
it's
it's crap.
causing, yeah, and it's causing basically we've returned to basically, although we give the Middle Ages a bad rap, we go back to when most of the population, we're essentially now living in a way just like when most of the population was illiterate. there's too much information for everyone to know.
Hmm.
It's easy to hide things, it's easy to go through things. So it doesn't matter if you can read now. There's just not enough time in the day to keep up with all the information that's being put out there. But talking about the food stuff and conspiracies, and when you said 5 studies for every one study, it made me think of, I don't know if you remember commercials for Dentine gum. Four
Hmm.
or five dentists recommend you chew gum. There was a quiz show, and they asked, one of the questions was, what did the fifth dentist recommend? And you know what the fifth dentist recommended? Don't chew gum.
Hmm. And, all the people whose fillings are coming out because they've been chewing gum or they've
Right.
got these cavities, and yet why? Uh-huh. They forgot to listen to the one.
Right. Well, that's the funny part of it, right? So we got four dentists to say, yeah, chew this gum, but no one asked, well, why did the fifth dentist not go? Why did that fifth dentist say no to
Hmm.
why, or why didn't he recommend the gum? Like, what was the issue? Doesn't mean that the lone voice standing out is necessarily the correct voice, but it's interesting to note why is there opposition to this idea? Like, it could be
Definitely.
wrong or it could be right. You don't know, but it's kind of sometimes worth the listen because you might
I
not
think
get the reason you think you're getting.
I think you just raised a really, really important point, which is we don't look at that one or
Mm,
that 2 out of 10
right.
that don't. Like, why not? Who are they?
Yeah.
What's their background like? Why are they not agreeing with this? We don't ask that. And that's so easy to miss because what do you hear all the time? 9 out of 10 vets say, 8 out of 10 whatevers say, and it's always between 8 and 9, right? They never say 6 out of 10 say or 10 out of
Right.
10 say because they don't want to go too low because then you might not be convinced. They can't say 10 because that would be an outright suable lie.
Mhm.
So, they go for this high number that we're so used to hearing it, we don't question it anymore. And that I think is a big part of what we're saying here is you got to question everything. And no, I don't mean spend all day researching, but if it's important to you, if you feel it's important enough to have an opinion on it,
Yes.
research it. Don't just run your mouth because there's a lot of people doing that and there's a lot of crap being spread. And, I was thinking earlier today, funnily enough, that with social media, we get these opinions from people who are convinced they're right. Like we're always convinced we're right, based on probably not a lot. And
Mm.
sometimes they're not even people, they're bots. But we receive these opinions as though it's from a trusted friend or advisor, right?
Yes.
That's how social media feels. Like they're not going to lie to me. Well, yes, of course they are. They're more likely to lie to you than anything else because you don't exist. You're just an end user. You're not.
Yes.
You're a blip in the matrix. So of course they're going to lie to you because they're just lying to as many people as possible to get that result that they want. So that trusted advisor, which is how your brain is receiving this information, that trusted advisor isn't. That's not how it works. And like your first response might be, no, 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 I question everything. No, you don't. I would put money on it that you don't. You can't question everything. But what happens to the stuff that you don't question, the 1 out of 5, what happens to that is your brain that's only had a relatively few years to get used to social media, your brain receives it as fact.
Hmm.
And so, then you're given the behaviors to act on that fact. Your brain just receives information, it doesn't judge it. So
Right.
unless you step out of that and say, "Oh, I'm going to look into this. I have an opinion that's pretty strong. I need to know if that's true." That'd be a
Yes.
great question to ask.
Yeah. And to tie it, this makes me think of that example I gave of the dentists, right? When I was growing up, from seeing those commercials, I thought the fifth dentist recommended another gum.
Hmm.
That's how, because in the way the commercial was formed, right? And the way the question was said, in my head it was, oh, well, they're just suggesting a different brand of gum. Until I actually seen that quiz show and I was like, oh, wait, that makes even way more sense than what I was thinking.
Right?
Yeah.
And
But that's the
it's
thing, right?
just shifting perspectives and being open to doing that. It's so important. But we miss that fifth dentist. Like, I love that. I think that's an excellent example of stuff slips past because we're so used to seeing it, we don't notice it anymore.
Yeah.
Advertisements, oh my gosh, especially in the US where they advertise medication and you
Mm.
can tell the formula right away, not of the medication, but of the marketing. Think weight loss meds, very large person dancing around, happy as can be. Everybody's happy to see them. There's flowers and bright colors everywhere. Everything's wonderful. Just take this small pill and you'll be fine. And then they distract you with a different behavior, something really off script looking, while they tell you how many ways it's going to kill you. And then when they're finished running through those side effects, you're back to the singing and dancing again. And they're selling a lifestyle that you will not achieve, guaranteed, by taking their pill.
Yeah.
You will not achieve it, but your brain is just receiving this information over and over. It doesn't question it because it's there all the time. So it must be true, right?
Yeah. And to even further push it, for those of you listening who have that need to disagree or to fight when someone changes you, here's the deal. Do the research anyways and solidify your point. Because I
Yeah.
always tell people before you argue with someone, before you start your debate or whatever, try to think about the problem from your opponent's perspective because it'll do two things. One, it'll either tell you that this fight isn't worth having because you're wrong, you know, or you'll solidify your argument and you'll know how to counter their arguments. So, regardless of what your intention is, do your research onto a subject. No matter how much you think you know it, when someone gives you something contradictory to what you believe, look it up. And
Mhm.
maybe because you'll prove yourself right and you'll have the ability to shut down the other person. So,
And maybe check some different sources.
right.
Don't just look at the one that you know is going to agree with you.
Yeah.
That's important these days. Um, because you can find your confirmation bias everywhere. That's pretty easy to do. In fact, with algorithms, it will find you.
Yeah.
You don't even have to try. But what happens if you always watch CNN, but now you'd like to have a look at Fox, or
Mm.
vice versa? You're going to get very different views. What
Yeah.
happens if you go to Al Jazeera instead?
Mm.
Now you're going to get another agenda.
But you'll
So,
recognize the commercials.
right? Everybody has the agendas though.
Yeah.
So switch up your agenda or the place you go to get your reinforcement because that's one path, which is getting your reinforcement, is going to keep those blinkers on. And the other one might just let in a bit of daylight. And
Yeah.
that'd be so helpful. So you can see your way, you can see what you want to do next. Operating from somebody else's agenda is the epitome of a slave mentality.
Yes.
And when I say slave, I mean, I'm not talking one period in history or one skin color or anything like that. I mean, literally the act of being a slave. Whatever,
Yeah.
whomever. You can think Star Wars if you like, and Princess
Yeah.
Leia, like whatever works for you. But it's the act of being a slave.
Yeah. I've also heard it termed as peasant mentality.
Yeah.
Backing whichever lord gives you whatever
Yes. Same
funds.
thing.
Because it's the idea of so when Elon Musk took over X, a lot of the stuff I followed are like saying, because people are getting saying, oh, Elon's taking it over. He's going to be, he's going to be the bastion of free speech. And people usually, I watch their stuff online. They're like, it's another billionaire in charge. Like, it doesn't matter what billionaire you're putting in charge. They're billionaires. They have their own views that don't match yours. Like their interests aren't the same as yours. So it doesn't matter who you're backing. You're not winning regardless.
And that's where it gets so interesting because people are identifying themselves by who they back.
Yeah.
Well, seriously, find another freaking horse, like from any of them, because none of them are people to back. Like none of them are. Am I? earlier question of, well, never mind having so and so's back, do they have mine?
Yes.
That's the question you need to ask. Like, are you actually throwing your all in with somebody who gives a shit? Chances are not. So,
Right.
how are you going to navigate from that? How are you, like, what are you going to do with this information? You should at least give yourself the information, I feel. Have a fighting chance.
Yep.
You know, make a decision that's actually informed rather than influenced,
Right.
because there's a world of difference. There's such a world of difference. And I, full disclaimer, I don't claim to have everything right by any means. And I could even be saying things incorrectly today. So you might want to check them out.
Yeah.
There's a thought. I don't claim to be the fount of all wisdom. I'm just offering perspectives here. And my recommendation is just the same as the Buddha's was, and the same as Danielle's is go check it out, find out, look it up. Does it work for you?
Yeah. You know what? I think that's a good place to end this one. That
Okay, and
idea of
it's
fresh and early.
111. My time is 111.
It's one
Angel
one
numbers.
one. Yeah.
Angel numbers.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's a good one to end on. Yeah. Look at it for yourself. You can take like, the suggestions we gave you, but you don't have to blindly believe in them. See it for yourself. Because
Oh
it's
yeah.
the best way. Because once you assert things for yourself, then you can jump in wholeheartedly.
Hmm.
That's when all your mechanisms start to fire. That's when you're all in there. When you did your own research and you removed all your doubts, that's when you can fully function into what you want to do. So,
And that gives you clarity.
yep. So go find a topic that's important to you right now, and you hear people disagreeing with you about it. Go solidify your position or find a new position because you've researched and you've gone and you've looked at arguments and use multiple sources. Don't just use the ones that agree with you. In fact, I actually recommend start with the ones that oppose you and then come back to the
Hmm.
ones who agree with you.
Absolutely.
So, once again, I'm Daniel Dubois.
And I'm Michaela Gaffinstone.
Until next time.